The story of the tribe of Gad begins in a way that few would imagine, with the birth of a boy who, at first glance, might seem less important. Gad was not the son of Rachel, Jacob's beloved wife, nor of Leah, the mother of many of his brothers. He was born to the servant Zilpah, and his name means good fortune or luck. But was his life truly marked by luck? Throughout biblical history, Gad and his descendants became a strong, courageous, and determined tribe, known for their fearless warriors and for making a surprising choice. They decided to settle before crossing the Jordan River, separating themselves from the heart of the Promised Land. Why did they make this decision? Was it a mistake or a strategic move? Furthermore, the tribe of Gad faced spiritual and military challenges that shaped their destiny. Did they remain faithful to God despite being far from the rest of Israel? And what lesson can this story teach us today? Get ready, because in this video, we will explore the story of a people who started humbly but left their mark on the history of Israel. The story of the tribe of Gad began long before they became a strong and warrior-like people. It all started with the birth of a boy named Gad, in a time when having children was not only a source of joy, but also a sign of strength and the continuity of the family. His father, Jacob, was a man chosen by God and already had many children. However, his household was full of conflicts because he loved his wife Rachel more than Leah, his first wife. For Leah, each child was a hope of winning Jacob's love. However, over time, she stopped having children and made a different decision. Leah realized that her servant Zilpah could be a solution. Following a common custom of that time, she gave Zilpah to Jacob as a concubine so that she could bear children on her behalf. Today, this may seem strange, but in those days, having many children was seen as a sign of blessing and prestige within the family. Zilpah became pregnant and gave birth to a boy. When Leah saw the baby, she exclaimed excitedly, "What luck!" and gave him the name Gad, which means good fortune or troop. Genesis chapter 30, verses 9 and 11. To her, that birth was not just another addition to the family, but proof that God continued to bless her, allowing her lineage to grow. Gad, the seventh son of Jacob, was born amid family disputes. Despite this, he was part of the promise that God had made to Abraham, that his descendants would become a great nation. From an early age, he grew up among many brothers and soon realized that life in Jacob's household was not easy. Each person had their own story and significance, and he would need to find his place within this great family. The birth of Gad was only the beginning of a great story. In the future, his descendants would form a strong, courageous, and determined tribe. But it all started there, with a boy, the son of the servant Zilpah, who was given the name Gad, meaning good fortune. However, he and his tribe would become much more than that. They would become valiant warriors of Israel. Over time, the descendants of Gad grew and formed a numerous tribe within the people of Israel. But their story took a different turn centuries later, when God chose Moses to free the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. For many years, the Gadites, like the other Israelites, suffered under Egyptian rule. They were forced to work as slaves, making bricks and helping to build the cities of Pharaoh. Despite their suffering, this time served as preparation for what lay ahead, when God performed great miracles to free his people, sending plagues upon Egypt and parting the Red Sea. The tribe of Gad set out along with the other tribes toward the Promised Land. And it was during this journey that a special characteristic of the Gadites became evident. They were born warriors. The desert was a place full of dangers. Besides hunger and thirst, the people of Israel faced attacks from enemies such as the Amalekites and the Midianites, who tried to stop their journey. It was in this setting that the Gadites showed their strength. They were not just shepherds or travelers. They knew how to fight and defended their people with courage. In the desert, God commanded Moses to count all the men of each tribe who were of fighting age. When it was the tribe of Gad's turn, 45,650 warriors were recorded as ready for battle. Numbers chapter 1, verses 24 and 25. This number showed something important. The Gadites were not only numerous, but also prepared to fight and protect their people. Over time, the Gadites became known for their courage and skill in battle. They were resilient warriors, loyal and unwilling to flee from challenges. While some tribes hesitated, the Gadites moved forward with determination, trusting in the strength that God gave them. Many years later, this reputation as warriors would become even more evident. But from the earliest days in the desert, it was already clear. The Gadites were not just another group within Israel. They were like a shield, always ready to protect their people. After a long time wandering in the desert, the Israelites finally arrived at the edge of the Promised Land. Canaan, the land that God had promised to Abraham and his descendants, was right there on the other side of the Jordan River. However, before they could cross over to conquer it, something unexpected happened. The tribes of Gad and Reuben made a special request to Moses. The leaders of these tribes went to Moses with a bold proposal. They did not want to cross the Jordan and settle in the Promised Land like the rest of the people. The reason? The lands of Jazer and Gilead, which lay before the river, were fertile and ideal for raising cattle and sheep. Since these tribes had large herds, that place seemed perfect for them. Then they said to Moses, "We want to stay with our inheritance here, before the Jordan." The request took Moses by surprise. He looked seriously at the leaders of the tribes and immediately remembered an episode that had happened 40 years earlier. At that time, the spies sent to observe Canaan had brought back a discouraging report, causing the people to doubt God's promise and fear entering the land. As a consequence, Israel had to wander in the desert until that entire generation had died. Moses feared that history was repeating itself. Moses looked at the tribes of Gad and Reuben and with a serious tone asked, "Are you going to do the same as your ancestors? Will you discourage your brothers and refuse to enter the land that God has promised?" He feared that this decision would weaken the people and lead to yet another rebellion against God. But this time, the response was different. The leaders of the tribes explained their intentions. "We will not abandon our brothers. We will build pens for our livestock and cities for our families here, but our warriors will go ahead of the army of Israel. We will fight until all the tribes receive their land, and only then will we return." That changed everything. They were not trying to escape the battle. They only wanted to ensure a safe place for their herds. Seeing this, Moses accepted their request, but gave them a warning. "If you fulfill this promise and help your brothers conquer the land, you may return and live here. But if you do not fulfill it, you will have sinned against the Lord, and he will hold you accountable for it." The tribes of Gad and Reuben accepted without hesitation. Before God and all the people, they made a commitment. Then they prepared for war, ready to fight on the front lines in the conquest of Canaan. This decision revealed something important about the Gadites. They were men of their word, loyal and committed to the people of God. They understood that the Lord's promise was not just about receiving land, but also about faith, obedience, and unity. With courage and determination, the warriors of the tribe of Gad took their place on the front lines of the army, proving that their choice was not a sign of weakness, but of faithfulness and dedication to God's purpose for Israel. After Joshua led the people across the Jordan River, the Promised Land was finally before Israel. But there was a great challenge. The land had not yet been conquered. Fortified cities, enemy armies, and hostile nations were ready to prevent the Israelites from entering. It was time to fight, and the tribe of Gad, even though they had already received their inheritance on the other side of the river, did not stay behind. The Gadites kept their promise. While their families remained safe in the pastures of Gilead, their warriors marched alongside the army of Israel. They did not hesitate to take up their swords and spears to fight alongside their brothers. Together with the tribes of Reuben and Manasseh, they faced difficult battles to ensure that all the people received the land that God had promised. The conquest was not easy. Every city taken required strength, strategy, and faith. The walls of Jericho fell by the power of God, but other cities had to be won in battle. With each victory, the Gadites proved that they were courageous warriors, fulfilling not only the promise made to Moses, but also the prophecy of Jacob. Gad will be attacked by troops, but he will attack them and pursue them. Genesis chapter 49, verse 19. After many years of war, Canaan was finally conquered. The tribes that received land west of the Jordan began to settle, and then the Gadites could finally return home. They had fought with honor, had not fled from battle, and had not abandoned their brothers. Now it was time to reunite with their families and rest in the land that God had given them. But before crossing the Jordan back, the Gadites did something unexpected. Along with the tribes of Reuben and Manasseh, they built a great altar on the banks of the river. The structure was enormous, visible from a distance, something that would certainly draw attention. And indeed, it did. When the other tribes of Israel heard about the altar built by the Gadites and their companions, the reaction was immediate. To them, it seemed like an act of betrayal. They thought the Gadites were creating a separate place of worship, outside of God's tabernacle. This was very serious, because whenever Israel turned away from true faith, great tragedies occurred, plagues, defeats, and the wrath of the Lord. Fearing that this would bring punishment upon the entire nation, the Israelites gathered, ready to attack their own brothers and destroy the altar. But before making a drastic decision, the leaders of Israel decided to listen to what the Gadites had to say. That was when the truth came to light. The altar was not an act of rebellion, nor a sign of turning away from God. The Gadites explained that they had built it as a symbol for future generations. They feared that, over time, the tribes on the other side of the Jordan might question their identity and say that they were not part of the chosen people. The altar was a visible reminder that they belonged to Israel and worshipped the same God. Upon hearing this explanation, the tension disappeared. The altar was not a place for forbidden sacrifices, but rather a monument to remind the people of their unity under God. The conflict was avoided, and peace was restored. The Gadites then returned to their land, knowing that they had fulfilled their mission. They had fought alongside their brothers and ensured that their tribe would never be forgotten. Once again, the tribe of Gad showed that they were not just a group of warriors. They were a faithful people, loyal and committed to God and to their brothers. Times had changed. Israel was no longer a nomadic people wandering through the desert, nor just a group of separate tribes. Now they had a king, Saul, the first ruler of Israel. But there was a problem. Although chosen by God, Saul allowed pride to take over his heart and began to disobey the Lord. Because of this, God chose David, the young shepherd who defeated Goliath, to be the next king. However, this choice was not easily accepted. Consumed by jealousy and the fear of losing the throne, Saul began to relentlessly pursue David. The young man anointed by God had to flee, living as an exile, hiding in caves, and even among enemy nations to stay alive. But he was not alone. Over time, a group of men began to follow him. Brave warriors willing to fight by his side, even without promises of wealth or power. Among these warriors were the Gadites, and they were no ordinary soldiers. They were known for their impressive strength, courage in battle, and speed in combat. The Bible describes them as strong as lions and swift as gazelles on the mountains. 1 Chronicles chapter 12, verses 8 and 15. In other words, they were not only fierce fighters, but also agile and strategic, capable of defeating any adversary. They never retreated. They were warriors prepared for any challenge. These men crossed the Jordan River at the worst possible time, when its waters were high and turbulent, just to join David. This act alone showed how fearless and determined they were. While many were afraid to oppose King Saul, the Gadites made a bold choice to support the one whom God had chosen, even if it meant risking their lives. When the Gadites arrived before David, he looked at them seriously and said, "If you have come in peace to help me, we will be allies. But if you have come to betray me, may God judge you." 1 Chronicles chapter 12, verse 17. But the Gadites did not hesitate. They were men of their word, loyal and ready to fight. Without doubt or fear, they joined David's army, protecting him from Saul's attacks and helping to build the future kingdom of Israel. Many years later, when David finally became king, these warriors were recognized for their faithfulness and bravery. The tribe of Gad had already been known as a warrior people since the days of the desert, but now their reputation grew even more. They were not just soldiers of Israel. They were the mighty men of the king, defenders of the one whom God had chosen. This story teaches us an important lesson. True strength is not only about knowing how to fight, but about having the courage to stand for what is right, even when everyone is against you. As time passed, the tribe of Gad continued to be one of the bravest in Israel. Their warriors were known for their courage, strength, and loyalty. However, a choice made in the past began to bring consequences. When they decided to live on the other side of the Jordan, far from the spiritual center of Israel, they became more vulnerable. At first, the decision seemed perfect. The fertile lands of Gilead were ideal for their livestock, and the tribe prospered there for many years. But there was a major problem. They were more exposed to enemies. Unlike the tribes that lived protected within the territory of Israel, surrounded by their brothers, Gad remained on the border, in direct contact with pagan nations and constant threats. The first signs of danger began with attacks from the Arameans and other neighboring peoples. They invaded the lands of the tribe of Gad, stole their livestock, and threatened their cities. But the worst was yet to come. Centuries later, a powerful empire began expanding in the north, Assyria. The Assyrian king, Tiglath-Pileser III, launched a great military campaign to conquer new lands. As recorded in 2 Kings chapter 15, verse 29, the Assyrians attacked the tribes in the north and east, including Gad, Reuben, and part of the tribe of Manasseh. It was a devastating invasion. The Assyrians not only took their lands, but also carried many Gadites away as prisoners, forcing them to live in distant lands. They were torn from their homes, separated from their families, and taken far away. Over time, the identity of the tribe of Gad began to fade among foreign nations. Those once valiant warriors, who had been a symbol of strength and courage, were now scattered, without land and without inheritance. But this tragedy did not happen without warning. God's prophets had already warned that if the people turned away from the Lord and followed the customs of pagan nations, there would be consequences. Over time, the tribes that lived far from Israel's spiritual center began to mix with other cultures, and many abandoned their faith. Then, as the prophets had predicted, God's judgment came upon them. The tribe of Gad, which had once been a symbol of bravery, was among the first to be defeated. They did not lose because of a lack of strength, but because they were far from the heart of Israel's faith. Little by little, they faded from history, leaving behind only the memory of a people that was once great. This story teaches us an important lesson. When we distance ourselves from God, we become vulnerable. Just as the tribe of Gad chose to live far from Israel's spiritual center and ended up exposed to enemy attacks, we often face difficulties when we stray from the Lord without the protection that only He can offer. Even with this tragedy, God never completely abandoned His people. The promise of Israel's restoration remained alive, and centuries later, those who remained faithful had the opportunity to return to the land that God had given them. The story of the tribe of Gad does not have a glorious ending, but it leaves us with a valuable lesson. Strength and courage are not enough if we are far from God. In the end, it is not the sword that protects us, but the presence of the Lord. Now tell us in the comments, did you already know the story of the tribe of Gad in the Bible? Leave your comment, share this message with more people, like the video, and subscribe to the channel to follow more content like this. May God bless you.